Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and a doctoral student of psychology. Today, I want to talk about if you talk less, the faster an avoidant commits. And so, I'm not saying talk less like it's not in the literal sense. I wasn't really sure how to word it. What I'm saying is talking less about heavy emotional topics and also setting some boundaries about when you feel dysregulated is a better way to put it. Talking less about certain things when you're feeling dysregulated can actually set better boundaries and actually make your partner take you more seriously. Hence why I mentioned they'll actually commit faster. And it really does sound very backwards, but it is something that I've seen and I've talked to you guys before about. And part of the reason is because of values that avoidants have. And so avoidants value what they invest in. I'll start there, because I think we need to first talk about why this happens, why this occurs, so that you can get it a little bit more. And then we'll talk about how to do this. But first, I want you to understand why this is happening. When they're the ones asking questions, initiating, or trying to understand you, they become emotionally invested because they're putting effort into that. And so when you talk less about certain topics, or when you give them some space to be the one to initiate or try to understand you, the dynamic in the relationship or the marriage, it naturally shifts for the avoidant partner to make some effort. And so let's give an example of what this looks like. Let's say we have an avoidant male and an anxious, preoccupied female, and dismiss avoidant male, let's say they're married. It's just easier, husband, wife. Let's just say that, okay? The wife is always telling him everything that's going on in her day. When he's on his lunch break, she texts him and says, "I'm thinking of you." And she is always expressing herself. This is good. It's good. But what happens is she has taken up room unintentionally for him to not show up. And the reason why it's difficult is because anxious, preoccupied, they wear their emotions on their sleeve. It's easy. Avoidance, they take longer in general. And so if you're always doing it first, you're just taking up room, not intentionally, for them to express themselves. And so he is losing some investment to some extent because he's not the one making an effort. She is. But if she backed up a little bit, she doesn't call him during lunch, or maybe she'll say, "I would like if you could call me during your lunch break, this coming week or throughout the week. I want you to be the one that calls." Okay, let him do it. This example. Even if he doesn't call, wait and then have a conversation with him when he gets home, for example, because you want him to take more initiative. Don't tell him about your day. Sometimes don't tell him at all. Ask about his day and let him do the talking. This particular example, it can be a female. Avoidance can be female as well. I'm just giving that example. Let the avoidant do the talking so that you can be the one that is listening and they are the one investing. They're the ones sharing. They're the ones hearing your side. They're the ones hearing your perspective. They're the one that's needing you and asking from you, not the other way around. You want to try this every now and again. Okay, so that's what I meant. Avoidants value what they invest in, okay? The next one is that over-talking sometimes, it can signal eagerness to some extent. And if you are too eager, for example, they might feel like the intimacy is rushing. Even if you're married, they can feel like this. This is true. It's a dynamic that happens, long-term relationships. Maybe you guys have been off and on for like 3 years. Even if it's like a friendship dynamic, right? If you guys have been together for more than a year and you're like kind of going on dates, that's not really a friendship, but we can talk about that another time. But that is a really common dynamic that you guys have. And so if you want to talk about your particular example, because it's so common, you can talk to me about it. It's pinned in the comments. We can have a call and we can process it. Usually we can work on these things very, very streamlined. If any of you guys have already had a call with me, I try to get everything done in that session so that we can get the most out of your time and money, because I want you guys to live a good life. I want you happy. And so I really do recommend that. When you book a call with me, there's a spot where you can write all your details prior so that we can focus the entire session on what to do and how to get better at, adjusting these things, because I'm the only person that sees this. Everything's confidential, so you can write whatever you want. It's just me reading it. Nobody else is, okay? For my therapy side, I have an admin person, but they don't see stuff like this. No one is seeing this. It's all me, I promise. And so nobody is looking. It's all me. So you can write whatever you want. And so over talking, it can kind of signal that eagerness. And what do I mean? It can show up even in those long-term relationships, even if it's a friendship, right? You are still together to some extent, and you still don't want to do this even when you're together for a long time, because they read it as a rushing of intimacy, and it makes them get a little bit overwhelmed and confused, and they don't have room for their own communication. The next one is listening to avoidance is more powerful than talking. They perceive it like that. And so they are always listening to you, but again, it becomes very imbalanced. So sometimes switch it. Sometimes you be the listener. We just talked about that. You be the listener, it helps them invest. And the next one is when you're not the one always over-investing, always talking, always communicating, you can see their genuine interest. You can see what they want to talk about. You can learn what they're vulnerable about. And you can see how they feel safe around you, because they might talk about things they really haven't talked about much. I work with some couples where I'm working with them for a while. For example, let's say the avoidant is a male and the other partner is female. It's not always the case. So please keep that in mind. He might eventually, if she starts talking a little bit less, just to let him speak, he starts talking about things he never really talked about much. And she's like, wow, in like my 5 years of marriage, he never ever said that. And she's happy. Like, I'm really happy, but I also feel bad because it means that I feel like I don't even know him. And it's a sad and interesting reality, because it's like she's finally knowing him, but it hurts her because she's like, wow, I've been vulnerable for so long and you haven't been. It's this interesting dynamic, but it's also beautiful because she's actually getting to know her husband and finally feeling that investment. So, how do we even start doing this? Well, the first point is actually literally be a little bit mindful of how often you're talking, at least in the beginning, just for practice. I know it sounds strange, but just for practice, literally talk a little bit less. If they are telling a story about something, anything. I was just with my significant other. He told me about fishing. He loves fishing. He loves cat fishing. And he was telling me about, like, you rip it open, a bluegill, something, y'all. I don't know. But I was listening, but I just don't fully understand it. But I know that's how he catches catfish. And pretty much the whole time, I let him talk. I asked him a little bit of follow-up questions, but I let him talk because I know that that's what makes him feel comfortable. But that's kind of the way to do it. Talking a little bit less can allow the avoidant partner to open up. And then on the flip side, he can do it with me when it's my time to talk. But for you guys specifically, I want you to practice talking less in general. The next one is past mistakes that have already been addressed. Avoid rehashing them for a certain amount of time. Whatever amount of time it is, avoid rehashing it for a little bit and focus on positive things temporarily so that they get more comfortable with you. They feel more safe with you. The next one is hypothetical questions. Really avoid doing this. Would you love me if? It feels like you don't care about me because I feel like you would do this if I did this. Try not to do the hypothetical questions. The next one is frequent gossip can sometimes push avoidance away. So actually, what I would recommend is if you have friends, gossip with them and only bring up a little bit of what you talk about with your avoidant partner. Don't bring all of that stuff. In fact, save some dynamics that you don't even bring into your marriage or relationship. Bring it to your friends. Bring it to your dad or mom on the phone. Because what happens is that space that you've created, eventually your avoidant partner will fill that space with their vulnerabilities and you finally get to know them. And so really, there's no one way to do this, but some examples could be talking less about events that you have. You can still bring it up, talking less about long-standing issues. We just talked about that. Talking less about some of your hobbies, let them talk about it. In general, all of the topics you talk about, take a little bit of space when talking about them. I have even had some patients that really struggle with this one, okay? Give it, like, literally in the beginning, practice and give it a legitimate timer. Like if you are on the phone with your husband or something, look at how long you're talking about that topic.
One of the biggest mistakes people make with avoidance is believing that more communication will create more closeness. In reality, the more you chase, explain, repeat your feelings, or seek reassurance, the more pressure the avoidant often feels emotionally. They may care deeply about you, but constant emotional intensity can activate their instinct to pull away. That is why silence, calm, grounded, emotionally controlled silence, becomes so powerful. When you stop over-explaining yourself, something changes in the dynamic. You are no longer trying to convince them to love you, understand you, or choose you. Instead, you begin standing in your own emotional strength. That shift is deeply felt by the avoidant, even if they never admit it openly. Your absence creates space, and space forces them to feel what your constant presence once distracted them from. Mystery is powerful because it interrupts predictability. When you stop chasing, the avoidant can no longer assume you will always be there waiting, explaining, or fixing the connection. Suddenly, they begin wondering what you are thinking, what you are feeling, and whether they are losing access to your energy. That curiosity slowly turns into emotional awareness. Your silence is not about manipulation or punishment. It is about self-respect. It is choosing peace over emotional chaos. And ironically, the calmer and more emotionally detached you become, the more attractive you often appear to the avoidant. Why? Because your energy now feels safe, independent, and difficult to control. In many cases, this is the moment the avoidant starts moving closer, not because you begged them to commit, but because your silence finally allowed them to feel your value emotionally. Avoidants are often misunderstood because their distance can look like a lack of care, but in many cases, it is not love they fear, it is pressure, emotional overload, and the feeling of losing control inside a deeply emotional connection. When conversations become too intense, too frequent, or too emotionally demanding, an avoidant can begin to feel trapped instead of connected. Their instinct is usually to retreat, shut down, or create space to protect themselves emotionally. This is why constant discussions about where the relationship is going, repeated emotional reassurance, or nonstop processing of feelings can unintentionally push them further away. Even if your intentions are pure, the avoidant nervous system often interprets heavy emotional energy as pressure. The more overwhelmed they feel, the more they disconnect internally. What makes an avoidant feel safer is not emotional chaos, it is emotional steadiness. A calm, grounded presence gives them room to breathe. When you carry yourself with peace, patience, and emotional self-control, they begin associating the connection with safety instead of stress. They no longer feel forced to perform emotionally or constantly defend themselves. This does not mean you should suppress your feelings or become emotionally unavailable yourself. It means learning the difference between emotional expression and emotional pressure. Quiet confidence often speaks louder than emotional urgency. When your energy says, "I value myself whether you stay or leave," the avoidant feels less threatened and more emotionally open. Ironically, the less emotionally crowded the relationship feels, the easier it becomes for the avoidant to move closer naturally. Your grounded presence becomes a place where they can lower their defenses instead of raising them. And over time, that sense of emotional safety can create deeper trust and calming. One of the most attractive things to an avoidant is not desperation, emotional chasing, or constant attempts to prove your worth. It is quiet confidence. Confidence sends a powerful message without needing endless words. When you carry yourself with self-respect, emotional balance, and inner peace, people naturally feel your value. Avoidants especially notice this because they are highly sensitive to pressure and emotional dependency. Repeated explanations often come from fear of being misunderstood, abandoned, or not chosen. But the more you try to convince someone to stay, the more the relationship can begin feeling emotionally heavy. An avoidant may start associating the connection with obligation instead of freedom. That is why emotional control becomes so important. Emotional control does not mean hiding your feelings. It means not allowing your emotions to control your actions, your self-worth, or your identity. The moment you stop centering your entire world around the avoidant, the energy changes completely. Instead of watching you chase their attention, they begin seeing someone who is deeply connected to their own purpose, goals, healing, and peace. You become harder to predict, harder to emotionally control, and far more respected. When your focus returns to your own life, something unexpected happens. The avoidant begins noticing your absence emotionally. They realize your energy was valuable because it was genuine, supportive, and grounding. But now, they also see that you are capable of moving forward without begging for validation. That realization often creates deep emotional reflection inside them. Self-respect is powerful because it communicates abundance instead of fear. It says, "I care about you, but I will not lose myself trying to keep you." And for many avoidants, this is the energy that finally awakens admiration, attraction, and even commitment. Not because you forced them to choose you, but because your confidence quietly reminded them of what they could lose. For a long time, many avoidants unconsciously rely on the belief that you will
always be there no matter how distant they become.
They grow comfortable with the pattern. You reach out first, you explain your feelings, you chase clarity, and you keep fighting for the connection even when they pull away. But everything changes the moment you stop seeking validation from them and start becoming emotionally independent. Emotional independence is powerful because it breaks the cycle of emotional chasing. You no longer need constant reassurance to feel worthy. Your peace no longer depends on their attention, texts, or emotional availability. Instead of waiting for them to choose you, you begin choosing yourself. And that shift is deeply felt by the avoidant, even if they never say it directly. Suddenly, the avoidant senses something unfamiliar, the possibility that you may truly move on. Your energy becomes calmer, less reactive, and less attached to controlling the outcome of the relationship. You stop trying to force closeness, and ironically, that is often when they begin feeling emotionally drawn back toward you. Why? Because avoidants are often more affected by emotional distance than they appear. When they realize your attention is no longer guaranteed, the emotional safety net they unconsciously depended on starts disappearing. For the first time, they feel the genuine risk of losing someone who brought value, warmth, and emotional depth into their life. This realization can trigger deep reflection. They begin noticing your absence in quiet moments. They wonder if someone else will appreciate you. They start comparing the peace of your energy to the emptiness created by distance. And many times, this emotional awakening pushes them toward commitment faster than years of chasing ever could. Not because you manipulated them, but because your emotional independence finally showed them that love is not something they can endlessly take for granted.